The world in 1750 was composed of many diverse kinds of human communities. Let's start with empires. Empires stretched across vast regions of the world. Now, many of these empires had been around a long time. You've already encountered some of them in Unit 3. In Afro-Eurasia, the Ottoman Empire had begun their conquest of the Eastern Mediterranean as early as the 13th century. And Russian expansion into Central Asia went back 300 years. In South Asia, the Mughals dated their rule about 200 years back. And the Qing dynasty had ruled China and parts of Central Asia for a century. Similarly, over in the Americas, some of the Spanish and Portuguese colonies could be traced back 2 or 3 centuries. At the same time, the British, French, and Dutch overseas empires were quite a bit newer. But lots of people didn't live in empires at all. Many of them lived in smaller centralized states. Most of these were kingdoms of some sort, a type of government that dated back as much as 5,000 years. And others lived in even older types of organizations, in small communities where all politics was local. These societies were usually led by a council of elders or some chiefs, and people who lived in them were connected by family or a shared sense of place. And in some cases, these small communities were tied together in confederations of villages, all kind of loosely connected to each other. Of course, just because they were older doesn't mean that these forms of community weren't changing or evolving. It just means that in some places, local conditions led to smaller and less centralized governments. And the small size of these communities doesn't mean that these people had no sense of community outside of their own neighborhood and village. Many people sensed that they shared a language or a culture with people who didn't necessarily live in the same political unit as them. Even more, people felt a sense of community with others who shared their religion, even if they were separated by many miles. And many of these religions were very old indeed. Islam at this point had existed for a millennium. And the kinds of Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism that were practiced in the 18th century were each evolved from much older religious communities. But one thing that most people shared in common, whether they lived in a big empire or a little village-based community, was an understanding that they were really somebody else's subjects. They all shared a sense of really not having much political authority or standing of their own. Instead, they owed their allegiance to someone else, to a chief or a prince or a ruler of some sort, and that person had the right, or at least the power, to make decisions for them. But all of that was about to change. In the long 19th century, the era between 1715 and 1914, new ideas were emerging. The first of these was individual sovereignty, the conviction that a person has a right to control their own bodies and choices. And this was connected to national sovereignty, the idea that people together have the right to make political decisions and to exercise leadership. And these ideas were connected to nationalism, the belief that people governing themselves have the right to a homeland. Together, this made a new form of community, which people called the nation state. Now, a nation state is a state, which is to say it's a legal unit, it's a piece of territory. But it's a state that coincides with a nation, which is a self-governing group of people. And there's no doubt that this change was revolutionary, as you'll see in this unit. But I still want you to question the story I just told you for a couple of reasons. First, some people before 1750 had experimented with ideas that sounded quite a bit like sovereignty and had created governments that looked a little bit like the nation state. So these ideas weren't really entirely new. And also, even after revolutions created the first nation states in the United States and Haiti and France and Latin America, the new freedoms that they promised really spread very gradually and unevenly. And at first, they were enjoyed only by a privileged few people. And finally, while the long 19th century might have been an age of revolutions, and it was also still an age of empires and an age of slavery. Nevertheless, these new nation states represented maybe the most important changes in the community's frame in hundreds of years. And as a result, they produced changes in areas outside of politics. For example, new technologies had to be developed to support larger and larger nation states. And that meant better methods of organization had to be invented, and also new ways of communicating across long distances. And similarly, the new nation states needed new military technology to make them stronger than local warlords or nobles who might resist them. With these advantages, the nation state was able to dominate all other forms of political organization, and eventually, nation states came to cover just about the entire world. And so for better or worse, we live in a system of nation states even today. And seen through the communities frame, that's one way of describing this era. Can you use the production and distribution and networks frames to tell a different story about this period? I think you can, but we'll leave that up to you.